Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the September 7th, 2016 regular meeting of Council. The City of Parksville recognizes the people of the Coast Salish Nations and their traditional territory upon which we gather with gratitude. The first item we have this evening on the agenda is the minutes of the Council meeting held August the 15th, 2016. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Beale. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. The next item is the approval of the agenda, that the September 7th, 2016 Council meeting agenda be approved. Moved by Councillor Salter, again seconded by Councillor Beale. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Thank you. We have two delegations this evening. And the first delegation is the Parksville Downtown Business Association, under the direction or under the tutelage of our Executive Director of the PDBA, Ms. Pam Bottomley. We have Julie Preston and Nolan O'Hara, the PDBA Downtown Youth Ambassador. So would you please come to the microphone? And we're delighted that you're here, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Your Worship, Council and staff, thanks for having us back again. I had a fabulous summer working with these great young people. I'm sure you're going to be impressed with what they've found out. And I'm going to just ask that any higher level questions regarding strategy, money, and next steps be directed to me, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Julie and Nolan, you have the floor.
Thank you.
Go right ahead.
See if I can get this.
Please speak right into the microphone, as close as you can get.
Cut off? Okay.
Okay, thank you for having us this evening. Nolan and I created this presentation to present to you tonight. This is the Parksville Downtown Business Association Youth Ambassador Report of 2016. So, what were our goals, our Youth Ambassador goals for this summer? We wanted to provide information to the community, providing the information to, providing the community with information and with the guests that were in the area, guests being local and tourists. We also wanted to assist the guests in finding the local shops and services in the area, as well as connecting with the PDBA members and gathering data for research purposes. How did we do this? We made ourselves available to guests both in the downtown and waterfront area. We used the iPad, the PDBA's business directory, walking maps, and other event activity information. We also visited the businesses, owners, and managers in the area.
So what did we find out? Over the 10-week span that we had, we tracked various statistics, including guest origin, the interaction topics of the discussions we had with guests, and the locations of said interactions. We used the data we collected to monitor trends in guest activity and expand our knowledge in, the frequently asked questions and the topics surrounding them. There's a few extra activities that we started ourselves over the summer. We mapped the bike rack locations around Parksville. We studied the homeless or transient populations movement throughout the summer, and we also put our bi and trilingualism to use.
So in this chart that we created, we took together all the data that we gathered, and here we have just under 42% of the people we spoke with being local, which is Parksville and the surrounding city. We also found that under 26% were from BC, being Victoria, Vancouver, Kelowna. 11.5% were from Alberta, and we've we're surprised that 6.7% were from Europe, whereas there was only 4.8% from the States visiting. 4.4% were from other Canada, being Ontario, Quebec, and 2% were from Asia and Australia. Another 2% were from South America and Mexico, and 1% were from Africa.
All right, so in this graph we have we've sort of enumerated the interactions, the topics of interactions that we had throughout the summer. I'll only list off about the first 5 or so because there are quite a few. So first and foremost, we have questions or interactions regarding the PDBA itself and our youth ambassador position. So many of these questions were about, what we do and who we work for, I suppose. Next off, we had just general conversation, talking about the weather, stuff like that. Beach Fest, which we separated later on. There's special events and activities, but we separated because there were actually so many questions regarding Beach Fest itself. Then the next 2 were downtown shopping and services, as well as downtown food and beverage, which were also 2 very common interaction topics, I suppose.
So in this chart, we tracked that 84% of our interactions were at the beach area, and 8.8% were in the downtown streets, and another 8.1% were on the highways.
All right, so here we have feedback from guests, and yet again, there's quite a few bullets, so if you have any questions for clarification on any of them, just feel free to ask it at the end of the presentation. So first off, we have many guests found that the appearance of the town was either subpar or unclean. There were also quite a few guests who commented on how they were interested in nature-based activities in the area. Bylaw enforcement or maintenance at the waterfront and community park were commented on frequently. The Ask Me on our shirts actually was noted in more than 50% of the interactions that we had with guests. Guests often did not want to travel up the main hill to get food at lunchtime. Pedestrian travel in the town was found to be uncomfortable by many guests. Many of them wished for bike racks at the waterfront and park areas. Wi-Fi at the beach and around town was frequently requested or looked for, and there was a lack of recycling or garbage disposal commented on by the guests at the waterfront area specifically.
As Nolan mentioned, the lack of garbage and recycling was a concern and complaint throughout the summer. And on the left, there's a photo of a picture we took throughout the summer. However, now there are the new disposals placed in the area.
So yet again, one of the concerns that the guests had, and ourselves as well, was the cigarette disposal around the city and beach areas. And as you can see yet again on the left, we had some guests who had decided to make a pile of sand to use for disposing of their cigarette butts. And yet again now there are the cigarette disposals, thanks to the City of Parksville, that have been put in place. And hopefully next summer this won't be an issue for the next generation of youth ambassadors.
Another thing that was quite common was that a lot of people biked down to the beach area. However, they did complain about the lack of bike racks down at the beach. There are plenty throughout the city, however, lacking at the waterfront, and that was something they wanted to see for the future.
So this slide is dedicated to sort of our personal feedback regarding what we found throughout the summer. Felt there's a lack of bylaw enforcement around the beach specifically. Pedestrian safety or comfort levels in certain areas in the downtown part of Parksville was low. There were possibly a higher availability or variety in local souvenirs, or specifically Parksville souvenirs in the downtown businesses could be appreciated by guests. More family-friendly activities apart from just the beach in the downtown area was also a concept, I suppose. An ATM machine at the beach and park area, at least during the Beach Fest season, could be useful, as many guests were searching for ATM machines and came to ask us. Kite sales in summertime could also be quite useful, as many guests were looking for kites. Wi-Fi availability around the city and waterfront would possibly boost business, and the Youth Ambassador tent or kiosk possibly for next year as a sort of home base. Oh, sorry.
And so, a summary, we visited 139 unique businesses in the area, and we really enjoyed connecting with the guests and the owners of these businesses. We found that the position was quite enjoyable and rewarding to both of us, and we wanted to thank everyone who supported us in this 10-week journey. Yes.
And so if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask about the presentation, we'd love to hear them.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much for supporting and helping us support our beach. I know there's a lot of questions, so I'm going to start off with Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for your presentation. I just would like to go back to pedestrian travel in the town is uncomfortable, and then you mentioned it again, there was places people weren't comfortable in going. Could you speak more about that?
So quite a few of the guests who we spoke to had comments regarding, the crosswalks and areas along specifically the Island Highway that they found to be uncomfortable for either crossing or walking on. We actually had two ladies stop us specifically just to have a nice conversation. I think it lasted more than 10 minutes about how they felt walking around the city and how, along the Alberni Highway, the crosswalks there, they felt that the cars were moving too fast and that they just generally were uncomfortable walking on the sidewalks and crossing the highway. They specifically had a few suggestions regarding maybe speed bumps in the downtown area, or I believe they said maybe making it one-lane traffic, which was just, generally speaking, it was just uncomfortable walking along the highway and such.
Councillor Beale.
Thank you, and yes, I'd like to add thank you for your presentation and all the information you gathered. I was curious about, comments about the appearance of town being subpar, unclean. Was a lot of this to do with the appearance of cigarette butts, or can you also elaborate on what kind of comments people were making?
So another one of the, as you're saying, the comments that guests were giving us were, it was regarding litter quite often. And yes, there were the comments about cigarette butts quite often, mostly from parents, and, didn't like having their kids around it and stuff like that. And having cigarette butts in the sand and on the highways and such was found to be, unclean. We also had some comments, specifically, I'm thinking of one discussion in particular where a woman was talking to us about how she found that the store faces and such were sort of worn and dirty in the downtown area. But yeah, it was mainly litter at the waterfront and along the roads that was commented on.
I just want to point out for the members of the audience and those watching on live streaming, Councillor Salter is not being standoffish. She's got some rib problems, and it's sore to sit down, so she's been standing up. She'll come to the microphone when she needs to. Any other further questions? Councillor Oates.
Thank you very much for your presentation. On your youth ambassador feedback, you noted the lack of bylaw enforcement around the beach. Could you shed some light on what the biggest infraction that wasn't being enforced, or that would need the attention of a bylaw officer?
We found that a lot of the bylaw concerns were regarding dogs off leashes. We also had a lot of people saying wildlife. Pardon? Oh yeah, the wildlife being removed from the beaches, people taking things that they probably shouldn't have, and yeah, shellfish and such. Yeah.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm assuming that this report will also be provided to the Downtown Business Association for any efforts that they can make with any of the things that can be done, so we can collaboratively work together.
We'll be making a presentation on the 13th to the business mixer, I suppose, for the PDBA, and it will also, I believe, I'm just going to ask Pam, it will also be made available to all the guests, the members as well, correct? get into
And
them.
would you do it again?
Well, yes, we would do it again. However, it is a job where there's new people every year, but it was, yes, quite enjoyable.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to go to Councillor Patterson first, and then we'll come back to you, Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you both and the Downtown Business Association. I think this is a great project, and it's in its second year, and I would strongly support it going forward in the future. For your next batch of youth ambassadors, what kind of information would you pass on to them that you think that they would benefit from?
Wear sunscreen.
We found that carrying toilet paper with us was quite useful. We had someone bleeding, we had toilet paper, we needed to wipe up stuff, we had toilet paper with us.
There's quite a few bizarre small suggestions we could think of, but definitely stay informed about activities occurring in the downtown area. You know, plenty of people are very interested in knowing what they can do if they're visiting, or I mean locals as well, what they can do in the downtown area during summertime especially. And so, yeah, I think that would definitely be my suggestion to them. Stay informed.
Follow-up, Your Worship? Your predecessors, one of their comments in that last year was some of our transient population that come through in the summertime. Did you find that you had interaction or any comment from the public?
We had concerns from the public only a couple times. However, it was not common. We did find that there were some regulars, but they were not that common throughout the day. They came out more towards the evening. It was not that big of an issue we found this summer.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your contribution and coming back to council on that again.
Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I just wanted to thank you for the photos. Picture, is worth 1,000 words, and the photos of the bicycles leaning here and there and everywhere certainly speaks to the need for looking at bike racks down in the park. So thank you.
One of the things that I can assure you is that you can hear from councillors that we take this very seriously. So we're very, very grateful for what you've done. I have a few questions. When you showed the picture of the recycling garbage, do you feel that the new garbage disposals will be better and work better than what we had before in terms of your then and now picture?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with the cigarette disposal, for sure, because now we have actual disposal or receptacles for them. As garbage and recycling goes, though, I do believe so, because
we had people wanting to recycle, and they didn't want to just throw it in the garbage. So we absolutely think that this is a great improvement. Yes.
Okay. The bicycles, I noted, is the bicycle wanting to have bicycle racks, is that mainly because of Beach Fest, or is it just a general comment regarding the whole park?
Quite a few people go down to the waterfront, or the boardwalk area specifically, to go on bike rides. And, maybe they'll spend some time at the beach or in the park or even downtown, except they'll walk up from the hill and such, and they don't have a place down specifically at the waterfront to store their bikes. And so I believe it would be obviously in the summer there's quite a few people biking compared to in the winter, but I do believe it would be a year-round addition, I suppose. Use. Specific locations for bike racks again? Any particular locations where you feel like closer to the water, closer to?
Yeah. So there is one by the Beach Club Resort, and that one is always full. It's very used. However, by the main gazebo, by the washrooms, would be very useful. Yes. And perhaps one down by the labyrinth as well.
Thank you. I'm going to ask if staff have any questions. I gather staff will get a copy of this, Mrs. Comas. If staff have any questions, they can get a hold of anybody through you, Ms. Bottomley. Okay, great. I thank you again. This is a great report, and it's always a great help, and we really appreciate the feedback, good and bad, because that way there we can make our park a better place. And I don't know if you're aware or not, but this year we're going out to tender sometime in the fall. We're going to be doing looking at the community park master plan, and the information that you've given us here is going to be a big help in that master plan. I'm sure that a number of your comments will be fed to the consultant in terms of what you found recently, particularly this past summer. Thank you again. Thank you. And thank you, PDBA, for sponsoring this, and keep it up. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next delegation we have is from the Vancouver Island Crisis Society. Ms. Heather Owen of the Vancouver Island Crisis Society is going to give us a presentation to provide information on the crisis line, including statistics of the crisis line usage. Welcome. And I think we did things a little bit backwards. When we approved funding you, we should have had you here at the same time. We're a little bit after the fact, but we really appreciate you coming tonight. You want to turn the microphone? That's good. And speak as closely into the microphone. You just can somebody hook that up? You can't pull it too far because it'll unhook. And I want you to know that the night we discussed giving you money, there was a great deal of questions, so yes, maybe you can answer most of them in your presentation. Welcome, and go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and council members and staff members. Thank you for having us here. I apologize for not having a PowerPoint, but I just returned from holidays yesterday, so I'm here to do my best to answer your questions and provide you with a bit of information. So the Vancouver Island Crisis Society has provided crisis line services for over 45 years. On Vancouver Island, mainly in the central area, Nanaimo, moving into Parksville, and then down to Cowichan, and then about 7 years ago, the health authority was asking. There used to be 6 crisis lines on Vancouver Island, and they asked to amalgamate into 1 crisis line service. So anyone that was interested put in a bid to be that crisis line, and the Central Island Area Crisis Society got that contract with Island Health. So since then, we've been providing services throughout the whole island. Last year, our statistics showed that we had about just under 31,000 calls. And I believe just under 1,000 of those calls came from Parksville. And we also, about a year and a half ago, started a crisis chat, which meant from 6 to 10 at night, people could go on their computer and chat to us instead of using the telephone. And then a year ago, we started crisis text, which meant people could use their mobile phones to text us, again, from 6 to 10 at night. And the reason we went in that direction is because after talking to many different agencies, we support the work of many services that support people in homelessness and mental health issues and all of that type of situations. We were being informed that a lot of people are getting rid of their landlines, that it's moving towards, mobile phones. They don't have to pay for service on their phones, but they can get text quite cheaply. So a lot of the services we're finding that that's the way people, especially people with financial difficulties, were going. So we decided that if we're going to offer a crisis service, because the crisis line is viewed as an emergency service, we're right next to 911 in the telephone book. So we decided that if we are going to offer crisis services, we have to offer them to as many people as possible, to provide that service, different accesses to whoever's out there. So that's why we moved into chat and text. But we have enjoyed a long-standing relationship with Island Health, but we are just one little tiny sliver of their pie. And we fight for the same dollars as the emergency ER, crisis teams that support people and go out into communities. So it's difficult to get an increase in our crisis contract. So we are a nonprofit agency that has that contract with Island Health for the crisis line services. So about 90% of our crisis line expenses are paid by that contract. We also do community education where we go into schools and talk to children about youth. We do programs in the different communities. We go in and talk suicide awareness. We facilitate programs around suicide intervention. So those programs have to be funded somewhere else. So we get money from gaming, the province of British Columbia, gaming, and we also get money from United Way to do those types of programs. We call them community education programs. So because we have a contract with Island Health, we cannot ask gaming or United Way to help fund services that the crisis line provides because we already have a contract. So that limits us. So really we need to get, if we have a shortfall in our crisis line, we have to literally find private donations. And so our private donations, of course, like I'm sure you're aware that nonprofit organizations, many of them are being cut back, gaming's cutting back, United Way's cutting back. It's getting harder and harder to get money from the public because there's just more people asking more things. Yeah, I'm sure we're all aware of that. We get phone calls or get asked all the time. So it's hard to get the money to sustain these services, but we really believe that we have to offer these services in that way. So we have to fill that shortfall. Previously, when we have a hybrid model for answering our telephones and doing chat and text where we combine staff and volunteers. And it used to be 50-50. So 50% volunteers, 50% staff. But because, well, I'll just say that now we're looking at 25-75. There's less and less and less volunteers. And I don't have a guaranteed reason why, but it's a sort of thought that people are so pushed themselves, working harder, longer hours, both people have to work to provide for the house. They're being stressed more and more for their work hours that they're not volunteering as much. It's not just our agency that's seeing that. There's many agencies that see that. So now our contract was 50-50, on the basis that we had 50% volunteers, 50% staff. So now if we have to pay more because we are an emergency service and we have to answer those phone calls, so now we have to pay with that same contract for those extra staff hours, which is putting stress on us. So now we take some of the money we get from private donation that's used to always just go in to support all of the, going into the schools and talking to kids about programs and that type of thing, which everybody is very, our public donation people are happy to give to that, help promote the youth education. But we've had to take some of that money and just help fulfill those hours and all of the financial obligation of the crisis line. So that's where our stress has been, and why we made a request to the public about, can you help us sustain this text and chat? Because out in the crisis world, people are asking us, why are you only open those hours? Why can't you do more, be there longer? We need you. And it just really boils down to dollars and cents and paying people to sit in the seats. And the other little thing that does play a part is our average call length is about 20 minutes. So if someone's in a suicidal crisis, that could bump up to an hour, but somewhere in there. A chat or a text can go on for about 45 minutes. That's the average length of that. So it takes a little longer to do it. It takes a little longer to go back and forth, and because the person who's on the other line can be doing multiple things while they're talking to us. Sometimes it takes longer for them to answer, back and forth. So that's part of the reason too.
Do you want to just tell us? We talked about people who are suicidal. What other issues do crop up in terms of the calls that you get, aside from depression? I would imagine that's probably one of the big ones.
So about 50% of our calls are for mental health issues. So that's mental health support. That can be anywhere from someone grieving a loss, which we call situational. Something's happened, they've lost a job, they're upset, they need some support, all the way to mental health issues that are clinical depression, that have been going on, they can't get out of that type of depression. Bipolar, psychosis, schizophrenia, the whole range. So that's about almost 50% of our service. 15% of our calls are about suicide, which is a huge concern for us right now because it's not too many years ago. I would say 5 years ago it was only 9%. It's climbing and climbing and climbing. And what we're finding is the seriousness of our calls is getting bigger and more serious. So our calls, a crisis is something that includes a lot of things. Most people can get through one problem in their life if something's happening. It's when multiple things are happening. So it's hard to say it's just this one thing that's getting worse or it's multiple situations. But.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation. I'm going to turn it over to members of council. Questions from members of council? Councillor Powell, Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Worship. This isn't really a question. I voted against providing money, and one of the reasons I did is that the taxpayers already pay for this service through the provincial government, and now we're asking taxpayers again to pay through their property taxes. And to me, this is downloading. They've been downloading all kinds of services onto the municipalities, and I'm against that. I know that you do good work. And I know that before they amalgamated it into one crisis line, they had crisis lines, what did you say, 5 up and down the island. They provided excellent service. They did it on the dollars that were provided. And if the government is only funding you for 50% employment, then I think you need to go back to the provincial government and get the money to pay to run the service that they're paying you for. So I just wanted to say that out loud, that I was the person that voted against it, because I don't believe in downloading on this municipality anymore.
Thank you.
Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the information. It's really a lot of very good detail. I'm curious to know what kind of response you've had from other communities that you serve in terms of requesting additional funds.
So we put out we asked for money in many different ways. So we send out letters. We send out to communities like yourself. We do through service clubs, which we receive a lot of donations from to support us, and we also do some businesses and whatnot. It's not because we've been servicing this area for 45 years, we are much better known here. So going far afield, we don't get as much support because we've only been doing that for a few years, like say for 7 years. So in this local area, we receive more support. Exact dollars, I'm not sure. We're just trying to, our goal was $40,000, and I think we will reach that this year. Last year was $25,000. Was able to keep us going, but this year we're going to need 40. It just seems that everything's getting a little tighter. So we do get really well supported, Cowichan to Qualicum kind of area through service clubs and like yourself and city. But as we get farther afield, they're not used to us. They're not as aware of us. So it's a little bit difficult, more difficult that way.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you for your presentation. It's a bit of a tough one in that for me because it's something that I support as a person and personally and business-wise and know that there's a need for. But like Councillor Powell, I don't support it as a downloading at the municipal level. My question, though, to you is ages. Do you know your demographics, and are you able to give me any information on that today?
Sure. Okay, so for our crisis line services, our age range, boy, gets kind of small here. Okay, so our largest demographic is one from 31 to 50. That's probably about 50% of our calls. And then the next largest demographic would be from 51 to 64. And then we start to get into the 19 to 30, and the over 65 are similar. When we get into, and this might be surprising, but when we get into chat and text, in chat on the computer, our biggest demographic is from 25 to 39. And when we get into texting on the phone, our largest demographic is from 19 to 24. But we are starting to see, we would never really track the 0 to 12 because we weren't really being contacted. But now that we've offered chat and text, we're actually getting calls from youth that small.
Councillor Salter, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much for this presentation. I do know quite a bit about the crisis line. I work for the Ministry of Social Development, and I've been there for long enough to have utilized the services at the crisis line and to have referred many people to it, to the point where we've had people there well after working hours talking on the crisis line. So I mean, it's I know how valuable it is. It's invaluable, and I think financially there's not, how do you put a number on someone who's not okay and has no other place to turn. So I for me, having been a long time volunteer, I understand that the pot is pretty darn thin, and that there are a lot of straws in that well now. So with each year it gets more and more difficult. So I did support this, and I would continue to support it. In my opinion, we could have assisted more, but at least we assisted this year with some dollars for that for you, and I would be more than willing to do that again. I think one person, if one person is helped through this, then our job here is done.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that comment. I'd just like to say that I really truly can say that the crisis line saves lives every day. And I do understand that, I wish there was more funding from formal sources, but I think that we're not the only ones that are saying, hey, we don't have enough to make it go. I think that happens in schools, it happens in social services, it happens, and I wish we could just get more funding from our formal sources. That would be easy, but we're all being stretched. But thank you so much.
Just to follow up.
Councillor Oates.
Just to
follow up. Oh, I'm sorry.
I just was going to add that for me in the work that I do, it's a relief, not just for the client, it's a relief for us to at least have a referral and have some place to be able to send people, because otherwise there'd be nothing. It would be, well, I'm sorry to hear that. There'd be nowhere to send them. Mm-hmm. So again, I know the money isn't coming from the province, and I don't think just because I want it to, that it's going to happen. So we have to step up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Salter. Councillor Oates.
Thank you for your presentation. How many other crisis lines are there in the province?
I believe there are 9. The reason I hesitate was because they started to pare them down. One for each health authority was the way they wanted to go. Right. But it got too difficult up in the Kootenay area because of the distances. So they had more up there. So that just happened not too long ago, so I'm sorry, I can't
No,
get...
that wasn't really the meat of the question. It's more of what I'm going to get to. I imagine they're funded in a similar way and they're facing similar difficulties.
Every crisis line is funded by their local health authority. And if I could just say that ours is actually funded even more than most crisis lines because we're unique on the island here that we have a partnership with mental health crisis response. So a lot of the crisis response teams up and down the island, the public has to actually access the crisis line to get to those crisis response. So, and I think that's something that the mental health, like the island health, are trying to formalize a little bit more up and down the island. So,
thank you for the work you do. I wish there was less of it.
Me too. Thank you.
I have a question that's I'm trying to understand. I recognize the great work that you do and the importance of the work that you do. What's the cutoff line between your service and 911?
Well, certainly there is a bit of overlap, I guess, because we do training for 911, and sometimes they say they have regular callers too. So what we hope is that we try and handle people while they're having crisis and try to calm it down and try to see if there's another way to solve the problem than just to send the police out, because they have enough to do. So when a crisis line calls the police and say, 911, we need you, they know this is a life-saving situation. We have to be there right now. So we don't call them unless we absolutely have to. But we understand that as the public, if people are in crisis, if they can't get the right answer from one person, they will call another person and call another person and call another person. And I know that 911 gets a lot of phone calls that maybe they shouldn't. But we try to help them as much as possible. A lot of times the officers carry cards and ask people to call the crisis line instead of, at least they have a way to get support for those people too, right?
Do you refer people to 911 depending on the conditions of the caller? Would you say call 911 or?
The only time we would do that is if someone has information about someone being in danger of harm. Then we would say, could you please call 911 and report that, because 911 would want to hear first-hand knowledge instead of us phoning.
What's your assessment of looking after those who require mental assistance, or what's the word I'm looking for? Mental health issues. What's your opinion of the service in this particular area? Is it good, bad? Does it leave something to be desired? I don't want to put you on the spot. I don't want to ask an indiscreet question, but
so as I said, each different area has a crisis response team. So as a crisis line, we try to handle and manage people's concerns and crises as much as we can to help them problem solve what they can do, family, friends, connect with people that love them and can help them or drive them, or we do our best. But when someone is at a really highly elevated state and we can't seem to get them to calm down or make a plan like that, then we have to rely on other services like the crisis response team. The crisis response team wasn't working here in the Parksville area for a while. They now have a new manager and they are coming back again and getting more hours, and we are seeing a really better increase here of services, and it's getting better.
My last suggestion to you, next spring we go every spring to an Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities conference. It's all of Vancouver Island, including Powell River. If you want to get together and talk about your financial issues, we could maybe develop a resolution for that conference to see if we can't get you more financial support. I don't know how that would work, and I think that listening to my fellow councillors tonight, I think we'd be prepared to bring that issue to the Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities, and then that moves on to the Union of British Columbia Municipalities Conference. So If you want to get back, are you in the area? Are you close by, or where do you?
I live in Nanaimo.
Okay, so we could get together.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, let's do that and talk some more. And I'm sure that this council would be interested in. I'm looking around. We would be interested in making a resolution that we could take to the AVICC next spring.
That would be amazing.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much for all of your help.
Like my fellow councillors have said, thank you very much for the work that you do. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Council, we have two pieces of correspondence tonight. The first piece of correspondence comes from the Canadian Cancer Society with a request to endorse a recommendation to the BC government that you have before you. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Beale, seconded by, do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Powell. Discussion. Councillor Beale?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I've certainly read this over, and we have the correspondence, but I wonder if I might make a motion at this time as well.
All right,
Gary,
go ahead.
okay? Yes, oh, that's right. The motion is just to receive at this point.
Motion to
That's
receive.
right.
Motion to receive. Okay, so let's deal with the motion to receive. We have a mover and a seconder. All those in favor of receiving the correspondence? Okay. For, everybody put their hand up again. For, against? Okay, we have one in opposition. Okay, so, pardon me? Yeah, we're just receiving it. Oh, you're in favor of receiving it? Okay, so that's unanimous. So now, Councillor Beale, you have a motion.
Thank you. Yes, my apologies for earlier. But yes, I do have a motion related to this piece of correspondence. And I would like to, I move that the Council of the City of Parksville endorse the Canadian Cancer Society's recommendation to the BC government for smoke and vape-free outdoor public places. And second, that smoke and vape-free outdoor public places legislation would prohibit smoking and vaping in BC's outdoor public places, including restaurant and bar patios, playgrounds, parks, and beaches, with ministry guidelines legislated for post-secondary campuses. And thirdly, that smoking would include burning a cigarette or cigar or burning any substance using a pipe, hookah pipe, lighted smoking device, or electronic smoking device, with some exemptions for the ceremonial use of tobacco in relation to traditional Aboriginal cultural activities.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Oates. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Powell and then Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Worship. I'm just curious because part of this is the secondhand smoke exposure. And I agree with that. And then vape-free, does not have any secondhand smoke. So basically, it's more of a behavior that you're trying to support to correct. So that's why you included the vape-free.
Councillor Salter.
So I can't support this motion. And it's not that I don't smoke, I don't vape, I don't do those things. However, I don't think that it is the business of this council to make a decision like that. The reason being that those of us who hold office are not masters but servants of the electorate. In this, people can't be denied their basic human rights. And we can't shift responsibility for personal decisions into our arena without recklessly suppressing inherent human dignity and self-preservation. It's not within our work as elected representatives. Further, we must not assume that citizens left to their own devices are not capable of making personal life decisions without consequence or reward, which we all do as a matter of fact. Government does not have the right to impose our own stigma and values on others, or on one's right to smoke or vape, or by justifying that these decisions are considered to be far too important for people to decide for themselves. We're bound under provincial law, wherein smoking or vaping is not an illegal activity. We're also, I question if we are so arrogant that we believe that we can rewrite the laws of the province or the charter while imposing discriminatory social biases on a particular group of people. It's discriminatory. We must uphold our Charter of Rights and Freedoms on behalf of the electorate rather than attempt to dismantle these rights under the premise of patronization. I'm shocked that we're even considering this. I really am. We have laws that state it's legal to smoke, it's legal to vape. Lenin stated that liberty is so precious that it must be carefully rationed. Is that what we're doing then?
I know that 68 communities in BC are sheltered by tobacco bylaws with stronger protections in BC's Tobacco Control Act at the present time. So I'll let Councillor Beale have a say.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I think it's important to understand that this motion is looking at smoking and vaping in public spaces. We're not talking about everywhere, but we're talking in public spaces, public places that are used by general people of the public. And in fact, governments do regulate all kinds of things that are not necessarily illegal activities. Roads, for instance, have posted speed limits. It is not illegal to drive your car at 90 or 100 or 120 kilometers per hour, except that it is on many streets because, in fact, the laws and bylaws of the municipality decide that in the greater good, for the greater good, there is a posted speed limit. It is not necessarily illegal to have a small campfire in certain places, but that would be not appropriate nor allowed in the public park. So in fact, we do this all over the place. We have limits to what people can do depending on the context and what is going around and who is there. Now, this is put in place not only to protect people from secondhand smoke, but also to help prevent children from taking up smoking so that they do not see smoking as being a normal activity. And it also is really appreciated by people who are trying very hard to quit or to smoke less. Now, I do have also, if we think back to a couple of presentations from Dr. Hasselback and the data that was presented by the Island Health Authority, that tobacco use is the larger contributor to illness in this area. It's greater than alcohol, although that's been on the rise, and certainly greater than illicit drug use. I also attended some sessions not too long ago presented by Plan H, which is about healthy communities, and there are things that communities, municipalities can do to assist with tobacco reduction, which overall contributes to greater health. There are a number of municipalities in BC and elsewhere in Canada that have put in place bylaws to help limit and reduce the use of tobacco. And from everything that I've been reading, it's been quite successful. If you look at the video about Waterloo in Ontario and what they've done and how successful that has been, and the people who are smokers have really have also appreciated what's been done. They respect the guidelines. There's no smoking within a certain area around playgrounds, around parks, and people seem to be quite supportive. So I think that there is work that we can do, and I think that it's perfectly reasonable to consider this.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. While I see both sides of this argument, I won't be supporting as well, because one of the things that I feel is that it's completely non-enforceable. We do not have a bylaw enforcement officer that could even possibly begin to enforce smoking in a park area. That's just one little thing. I hate cigarette butts in our downtown area. I every day sweep my sidewalks, and that I try not to have smoking in my establishment. Although I have signs, they're posted, and I understand that some smokers are very, very conscientious, and that they do not smoke around children or other people, and that. But then there are those that don't, and that is a personal choice. So those are my comments, and that I won't be supporting. I do think that this needs to go to staff for feedback. I don't think that this should be something that we should be voting on this evening.
I have a question for staff. I'll get to you, Councillor Powell. What they're asking, what the Canadian Cancer Society is asking for, is to make the recommendation to the BC government to expand. So there would be no bylaw resulting from this if it's supported. It's just asking the provincial government, and it would be up to the provincial government to say yes or no. Okay. So, Councillor Powell, that's okay. Okay. Anybody else before I go back to Councillor Salter? Councillor Salter.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So I have a few things to say here. Number one is that we already have laws in place. We have a Tobacco Control Act, which is already in place, has been for a long time, since 2008. Part of that indicates the 3 meters being away, 3 meters away from a doorway, etc., so that people aren't being bothered by cigarette smoke. That's number one. So those things are already in place for playgrounds and doorways and whatever. That's number one. Number two, again, smoking isn't illegal. Number three, if we're talking about odors and being irritated by the smell of cigarettes or trying to stop people from smoking because somehow that's our new job, then how about people who run by you that are sweating? I don't like that. I don't like the smell of that. Can we stop that? Let's make that illegal. Let's make drinking illegal, swearing illegal, loud music illegal, cell phones.
Those aren't bad ideas. But
Cell phones, cell towers, because they can also cause cancer. So, like, how far are we going to go with this? I have something here. It's an address on the nation's business. It's 1960, John Diefenbaker. He says, the effort to safeguard human rights is, in my opinion, the most fundamental of all international movements today, and also the most difficult to achieve, and it is. The menace of war cannot be removed from human affairs so long as life and liberty are imperiled by arbitrary power. It is with this same thought in mind that not long ago I proposed the establishment of a court of international rights to have jurisdiction and authority to adjudicate on all violations of human rights and fundamental freedoms everywhere in the world. What will the Canadian Bill of Rights do? It will declare that the following rights and freedoms are in existence and that no act of the Parliament of Canada in the past or in the future, subject to the security demands of war, this is a quote by the way, shall be permitted to interfere with them. It will declare the principle that every individual, whatever his color, race, or religion, shall be free from discrimination and will have guaranteed equality under the law. This is so important today, for wherever discrimination exists in the world, there you have a seedbed for communism. And I absolutely agree with him. Absolutely agree. And we can't do this.
I'm going to write in my diary tonight, just as an aside, that Lee and Salter quoted John Diefenbaker.
I did.
I think that's amazing. That's a good point. Councillor Oates.
You know, I really didn't think there was even a debate here, but I want to just make comment on council's arrogance, I guess, in making a decision on this of this magnitude. I don't think we're any less arrogant about presuming that we can support the endorsement of the Canadian Cancer Society about people smoking in outdoor public places. I don't think that's any less arrogant than saying where a homeless person can set up their tent and how many meters from a path that should be.
Okay, any further debate on this issue? Reminding everybody that this is simply a recommendation so that the Canadian Cancer Society can go to provincial governments and see if they can get them to change their mind. So, yes, a final word, Councillor Beale?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for underscoring that, because that is the intent of this, to take this forward to the provincial level. And I think, well, in fact, behind that is the idea that it would be helpful if there was a more consistent approach across the province and across municipalities, which makes it easier for people to understand what the rules are and regulations, if there are any.
Thank you. On that final word from Councillor Beale, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Okay, that motion is carried. Thank you. All right. Good debate. Very good debate. Regional District, the next item on correspondence is from the Regional District of Nanaimo, the Northern Community Sewer Local Service Amendment. I need a mover and a seconder for the three recommendations. Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Discussion. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe this has to do with probably septic tank work? Yes. The Director of Engineering is saying yes. So I'm right. All right. On that note, are there any discussions on the three recommendations? It's fairly straightforward. Seeing none, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Okay. First report, which is the consideration of a development permit application for an apartment building, 312 Hirst Avenue, better known as the Kingsley Low Rental Housing Society. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the motion? Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Oates. Discussion. And if you read in the report, we've already, I see two individuals sitting in the audience. I need to say this because from the Kingsley Low Rental Housing Society, if we approve this, we've already approved the fact that we'd be waiving all the fees that go with it. So, any discussions on the motions? Councillor Salt.
I just want to say that I think Council have all heard from our participants here already, and we have had the opportunity to ask questions, and we have the report here. So, for myself, I think I feel fairly secure in what's in this now. So I don't have any further questions.
Okay, on that note, I'm going to call the vote on the two recommendations. For all those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. And for the information of the representatives in the audience, I saw a letter today which I forwarded to you, Mr. Round, to Lori Nickerson, and the RDN appear to be in the same situation. Okay, thank you. Next report is temporary borrowing for water infrastructure, and I do this all the time in my own borrowing life. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Rhodes, seconded by Councillor Powell. So, Mr. Butterworth, you want to take a minute and give us the background on this temporary borrowing for water infrastructure?
Yes, Your Worship. So, Council has approved a loan authorization bylaw for $5.6 million for long-term borrowing relating to the water treatment plant and new water intake. And the long-term borrowing process only happens twice a year, once in the fall and once in the spring. So with the long-term borrowing, you either have to borrow the money in advance of when you need it and start paying interest immediately, or you have to wait until you've spent the money, if you have the money, and borrow after the fact. So the temporary borrowing, the MFA has a program for temporary borrowing which allows you to borrow on a temporary basis until your project is complete and then convert that into a long-term borrowing. So this report is just getting the necessary approvals from Council for using temporary borrowing as opposed to long-term borrowing to complete the water intake and treatment plant. The recommendations as per the agenda.
To take advantage of the best rates we can get.
Yes, and also lower the interest, because if we borrow long-term in the fall right now in advance, we're paying interest on the full amount from day one, whereas this way we only pay interest after we borrow, and we borrow it in little bits and pieces as we need it.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Butterworth? Seeing none, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor of the three recommendations? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. The next report, something unfortunately we see too often and here at the council table, is an unsightly property, 255 Lodge Pole. Miss Kaler, you've given us you want to give us the background on the issue? It's fairly straightforward. Don't take too much time because your pictures say 1,000 words.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For this item, the pictures say 1,000 words, so the recommendations are per the agenda.
Are there any questions from Mrs. Kaler? Ms. Kaler? Pardon me? Oh, I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Beale. Any questions for Ms. Kaler? Councillor Patterson.
Just for clarification or remembrance, this isn't the first time that this property has been before us, has it?
The property has been the subject of bylaw compliance since January, but I actually don't know if it comes to us annually for the for this enforcement. I know that we have been dealing with them on an ongoing basis since January, which is about 9 months at this point, and the bylaw compliance officers have tried talking to them, verbal and ticketing, and it hasn't been effective. Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering, have we sent something in writing to this fellow? Do we have anything in writing that says you have to get this seen to? We do? Okay.
Ms. Kaler? Yes, we have.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have dealt with him both in writing and verbally for several months and tried to get compliance in other ways before coming to council.
Okay. Any further questions? Seeing none, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor of the recommendations? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried unanimously. Okay. The next report we have is on permissive taxation exemption for the Island Corridor Foundation. I need a mover and a seconder to receive for information. I have a mover, Councillor Oates and Councillor Beale, seconded. Okay, Mrs. Comas, would you please give us the background on the issue regarding permissive taxation exemption for the Island Corridor Foundation?
Yes, Your Worship. Council requested staff provide information on the permissive tax exemption for the Island Corridor Foundation. The subject of the permissive tax exemptions for the rail line is the subject of an agreement between the Regional District of Nanaimo, City of Nanaimo, Parksville, and Qualicum Beach. And it is an agreement that is in place for 35 years to start with, 25 years, sorry. It's a 25-year period, and we are currently in the first 10 years of the agreement. There is a bylaw that grants them that exemption. So regardless of the permissive tax resolution from the last meeting, their permissive tax exemption has already been approved by council.
Thank you. Any questions for Mrs. Comas? Councillor Salter.
So I did actually read the community charter, and we can, in fact, council can at any time change that bylaw. So it's not in place. It's every year we can review it.
Of this 25-year agreement, it just makes it a little more complicated than a regular bylaw.
We can still review it, though. There's nothing stopping council from reviewing that. And so my concern is that it doesn't meet the requirements of a permissive exemption anymore because it's not providing any services to the community. There's no volunteers involved. Are they a nonprofit? We don't know. We've never seen their books. They're not transparent. So we don't even know. It sounds like they're very for-profit business. In addition, we're told that we need this corridor for, at least in that report, for utility lines. Otherwise, we're going to have to pay for the utility lines if we don't get to use this corridor, if we don't give them the permissive tax exemption. However, by giving them the permissive tax exemption, we're paying for the use of that corridor. So I'm not quite sure how we can square that circle. I believe it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $10,000. Is that correct, Mr. Butterworth?
It's 13,700. The full 13,500 is the full exemption
Per year?
per year. Yes.
So, per year. So, yeah, over 25 years. It's a lot of money. And so, no, I don't support this because I don't believe that they're meeting the requirements of the charter, and that was not spoken to in what we received. What we received was, well, we have to do it because it was approved in 2011, but nevertheless, we don't have proof that they're no longer, that they are a nonprofit.
Okay, so let's vote first of all on the motion, which is to receive be received for information. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Does anybody else have another motion? No? So it'll remain as is? Okay, thank you. So next we're moving on to bylaws. And the first bylaw is, again, the Permissive Taxation Exemption Bylaw 2016, number 1531, Temporary Boring Bylaw 2016-1532. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Beale. Any comments, questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Final adoption, which is the Parksville Advanced Voting Opportunities Bylaw 2016, number 1530. I need a mover and a seconder. Really simple. I have a mover and a seconder. Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Oates. Any comments, questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. All right. So we're now at the session of council where we're under new business. Do we? Did I miss one? Oh. No, we just voted on that. Yeah, 1530, yeah. We voted on that one. Didn't we? Yeah, we did. Yeah, we voted on it. I announced it. Okay. You missed it. Okay. So I'm going to go around the table. Does any member of council have any new business? I'm going to start with Councillor Oates.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a couple of items of new business. I'd like to move the council approve $3,000 to cover the cost of a facilitated strategic planning session to be held on September 10th, 2016 with the board of the Parksville Community Center Society and council of the city of Parksville, and that the funding be provided from accumulated surplus. If I had a seconder, I'll speak to it.
Do I have a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Beale. Councillor Salter and Councillor Patterson, and are you paying attention? Okay. Oh, any discussion on that motion? Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. How much would that be that we've already, for the consultant, and now another $3,000? What did we pay for the consultant?
Mrs. Comas?
Yeah, the first consultant fee was $36,000, and this is another $3,500, so we're at $39,500 right now.
So it's safe to say from this strategic planning session, we'll come out with something concrete to move forward with.
One would hope.
Councillor Oates.
Yeah, just a little bit of background. A KPMG report entitled "A Business Analysis to Parksville Community and Conference Center" was presented to the Parksville Community Center Society Board in August. A staff report bringing the report forward will be brought to council at the September 19th meeting. And in the interim, the Parksville Community Center Society Board and the Parksville City Council will meet on Saturday, September 10th, to begin a strategic planning session in order to facilitate implementation of the report recommendations. And all the council that were at that meeting know that the Society wants us to work with them, and they're supportive of this and appreciative of this.
Okay, any questions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. You have something else, Councillor Oates?
Yes, Your Worship. With the upcoming UBCM convention and our lack of traction at the last UBCM convention, with respect to the borrowing referendum, I'd like to make a resolution. I'll just read here. In 2014, Council was required to hold a referendum to borrow funds for construction of the water intake, treatment plant, and transmission lines required as a result of change of operation requirement from Island Health. If Island Health had issued an order rather than a change of operation, the city would not have had to undertake the expense of a referendum to borrow the necessary funds. The irony in all of this is that if the referendum had failed, Island Health would have then issued an order requiring the city to undertake the construction and borrow funds regardless. The requirement for a referendum is contained within Section 180 of the Community Charter, and BC is the only province with this requirement. In 2015, the Mayor and members of Council met with the Premier and Minister of Community Support and Cultural Development at the UBCM conference and requested a legislative change to remove this requirement in order to avoid this expense in the future. To date, we have not heard any response to this request. Therefore, I'm asking the Council to support a resolution to submit a further request to the province in support of this legislative change. And the motion is that His Worship Mayor Mark Lefebvre, on behalf of the Council and citizens of Parksville, write to Honourable Christy Clark, Premier, Minister Peter Fassbender, Minister of Community Support and Cultural Development, and Minister Terry Lake, Ministry of Health, requesting amendments to Section 180 of the Community Charter Act of BC, Chapter 26, brackets SBC 2003, to establish a loan authorization bylaw for works required to be carried out under an operational order or order from the Provincial House Authority from the requirement to obtain approval of the electors. And further, that a copy of this correspondence be forwarded to the MLA, Michelle Stilwell, Minister of Social Development and Social Innovation.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Powell. Okay. Any discussion on the motion?
I think we formalize, we've had the informal discussions. We met with the cabinet ministers. We met with the premier. We talked about this. I think this is the natural next step when we don't get a response is to formalize it. So I'm looking for unanimous support of this.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just for clarification as well, do you foresee us going to UBCM and putting a motion forward there as well?
Maya.
I think it's a great idea. I think we missed a deadline for this one, though.
Okay.
So it would have to be for the next one. So I guess if we don't get traction with the letter to the premier.
What the premier did say, I think you were all there, when she turned to the Minister of Environment, Minister Polak, and said, you know, that doesn't make any sense. So I think that since we haven't heard from anybody, we'll give them a reminder, and next year we all know what next year is, so maybe we'll get a favorable response. So I have a mover and a seconder. Any further comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Okay. Anything else? Councillor Oates.
No, that's it. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Worship. Just a couple of things. Although with this change of weather, it might feel like summer is well behind us. It isn't that long ago that we were enjoying lovely August weather, and I got to enjoy a wonderful roundup event for the library's summer reading program. And I'd just like to report that it was a fantastic affair, and that this year there were in the range of 80 plus children who took part in the summer reading program. So libraries are alive and well here in Parksville, and there were 40 plus kids who took part at that event. So it was great. It was really lots of fun. I'd also like to mention that upcoming event that next week I will be attending a conference in Vancouver called Pro Walk, Pro Bike, Pro Place, and just wanted to share that this is a conference that happens every 2 years, and it features the latest research and best practices on building communities that are better for walking, better for biking, and are what people would call places. The theme of this year's conference is moving towards a healthier world. So I'm looking forward to learning what I can and hoping to bring back and share share what I have learned at that conference. Thank you.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have a motion to put forward. As everybody knows, it's going to be the 32nd Annual Chamber of Commerce Fantasy Auction this year. And the motion reads that the city contributes $300 toward a bon appetit from the City of Parksville auction package for the 32nd Annual Parksville Chamber of Commerce Fantasy Auction, and that funding be provided from council contingency. We do this every year, and the package contains a bunch of vouchers for different restaurants in town, and it's a good promotional donation, and I think it's really good for the city to do this, so I'd like to put that forward.
I need a seconder for that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Patterson. I was looking at you. Yeah, I'm not surprised. Okay. Any comments? Anything to say about that? Okay, seeing nothing. Seeing no comments. All those in favor? Thank you. That is carried. Anything else, Councillor Powell?
Yes, I'd just like to say I'm looking forward to the PDBA's mixer next week, and I hope members of council will come. It's usually a pretty good affair. And of course, we're going to have another presentation from our ambassadors, the downtown ambassadors, which I think was excellent tonight. And can I share this about the RFPs? The RFPs will be closing. I don't know if council remembers the presentation that we had from the PDBA about wayfinding and the different things, and they brought up the London wayfinding, and I've been there. Anyways, that's going to close next week, and so hopefully we'll get some really good ideas from that, so I'm pretty excited about it.
Thank you. I'll go last. So Councillor Salter, anything under new business? Councillor Patterson? Okay, very quickly, last Thursday night I attended at the invitation of the Newcomers Club to address them on what's happening in Parksville. We did something a little bit different. I decided to invite 4 former mayors, Mayor Longmuir, Mayor Hurley, Mayor Maine, and Mayor Berger, and they all wanted to come, but 2 couldn't come for good reason. But the other 2 that came, we had a great time. We talked about the evolution of Parksville and how we got in 2002 when we all got elected. There was nothing going on, and by 2003, all the baby boomers started coming. It was an interesting evening, and I think we'll do it again next year, given the support I got from the president of the Newcomers Club. It was well received. And incidentally, the majority of newcomers this particular year come from what I was told by the president, they come from the Lower Mainland. Last year, everybody in the audience came from Edmonton and Calgary, or the majority came this year. Most of them came from the Lower Mainland, which is an interesting phenomenon. The next thing I want to bring to Council's attention is I think we all got an email from, or I think I sent out an email. There's a Fisheries Act review update coming, and it's targeted to the public, DFO staff, provincial and territorial governments, and Indigenous groups. And what I'm going to propose tonight, I got the idea from Councillor Oates that we ask our communications officer to put the websites online on the city's website, so that if people want to participate in this review, it's a review of the Fisheries Act, and the Ministry of Fisheries, Oceans, and the Canadian Coast Guard has requested that the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans undertake this review and solicit input from all Canadian